The American dream is turning into a living nightmare. The skyline no longer shines, sirens scream through the night, your favorite hangouts are shutting down, and rent is draining your paycheck. It's time to flee to the suburbs. Or is the urban doom story exaggerated? On today's episode of the Infographics Show, we're looking at why American cities are becoming unlivable. When people picture success, they imagine America's great cities, New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, or the bustling metropolises closest to them. After all, nothing says you've made it like looking down from your penthouse. But turn on the news and you'll hear a darker story. American cities painted as hell on earth. They're unaffordable, crime-ridden, and more unlivable by the day. But it's just sensationalism. Or are America's cities really falling apart? Visiting America's biggest cities might be fun, but actually living in them is becoming nearly impossible. In the suburbs, a developer can buy an empty lot and build a condo complex that can house 50 families, all without bothering anyone but a few beavers. But in the cities, they're already packed, built out, and running out of room. And many cities haven't made it any easier. Building housing in cities has become increasingly difficult due to a number of factors. For one thing, many cities have a long history and they like it that way. In many cities, getting a building declared a landmark is surprisingly easy, even if the current owner objects. And that can make it impossible to make any changes to the building structure. Even if a building isn't frozen in time, local residents can object to proposed developments, and it can be a long, slow process to get it approved, leaving many projects in limbo, leading some developers to pack up. And the competition is fiercer than ever. Not only does everyone need a place to live, but cities have been hit hard by one major innovation in the housing and hospitality world in recent years: Airbnb. Short-term rental apps let people turn empty properties into mini hotels. So corporations swooped in, buying units just to rent them out. And that drained the housing supply even further. Cities like New York have since cracked down, banning Airbnb in many units, but rents haven't bounced back. And no matter how you choose to house yourself in the city, you're in for a rough time. If you want a house or an apartment in the big city, good luck. The rates of property ownership in many cities have gotten so high that only the rich can afford it. In New York, the median home price listing was $829,000, which means that you have basically got to be a millionaire to even consider it. Los Angeles is even higher at $951,000. Chicago might seem like a bargain, coming in at $315,000, but it's still out of range for many people. And there's no sign the prices are going down anytime soon. So that leaves renting, if you can afford that. As many people know too well, renting is a trap. You put a large percentage of your paycheck into your housing every month, but you don't actually gain anything long-term. You're not paying off your own house, you're paying off your landlord's. That makes it difficult to put money away that you'll want to spend on your own place down the line. And so many renters wind up renting for the long haul. No wonder so many millennials and Gen Z just stayed home with mom and dad. Free rent is fair trade for dad's endless takes on his lousy sports team. But at least renting means no worries about maintenance, right? It's one of the advantages of renting that you don't have to pay for repairs or utilities in many cases, but that doesn't always work out like it should. When there's a problem with a rental in the suburbs, the odds are you're dealing with either a private landlord or a corporate landlord in a recently built building. In the cities, it varies a lot more. Many of those historic buildings have older infrastructure, and the building has likely been sold time and time again. And that means that you could be waiting a long time if something breaks, which can be a major problem if the apartment loses air conditioning during the summer or heat during the winter, and many people find themselves simply priced out. Rent in New York City is over $3,200 for a studio apartment. Los Angeles looks cheaper at $1,700. But the affordable places are miles from the city center. Unless you've got serious savings, you'll need a high-paying job just to get a landlord to consider you. And even then, the market is brutal. Some landlords are rejecting hundreds of applicants and requiring application fees. But they say, don't blame us, blame the system. There are a lot of problems facing the housing industry in major cities, and one of them is the large-scale buy-ups of property by massive housing corporations. Combined with the regulations preventing the building of new housing due to red tape, the few apartments that are still available become even more competitive. Many cities have also instituted rent control for a portion of apartments, keeping the rates low as long as the current tenant or someone they designate as an heir lives there. But that motivates people to hold on to that place as long as possible. And when people can't afford homes, what they become next is kind of inevitable. One of the biggest complaints in American cities today is the homelessness, and no one can agree on a solution. Some blame the housing market and demand more subsidized housing. Others want the police to crack down, and some argue it isn't even a problem. And in some cases, it's not until it is. When experts talk about the homeless problem, they often ask, which homeless? Many are just people who fell on hard times, sleeping in cars or trying to stay unnoticed in parks. They might collect bottles, visit soup kitchens, or beg on street corners, and they rarely pose an issue for the average person, unless, of course, a city enforces strict anti-vagrancy laws, pushing them out simply because they look unsightly. But in other cases, the homeless can be a public health hazard. Many cities have become actively hostile to the homeless, removing benches and even public restrooms. But the thing is, that doesn't make them disappear. It just makes them more visible. And then there's the small percentage of the homeless who are severely mentally ill and may act out in disturbing ways. Many people have been confronted by an aggressive beggar who wouldn't take no for an answer, and that can be terrifying for those who find themselves on a subway platform next to them. And that might be part of a much bigger problem. Boomers will tell you that they didn't have all these mentally ill homeless people on the streets. They were locked up in the asylums, and it's true, but back then, it didn't take much to get committed. You could be a veteran who had a PTSD-triggered flashback in the middle of the street, or a willful teenage girl whose father was sick of your rebellion, and you could find yourself getting shock therapy. Backlash to the worst abuses led to a push for deinstitutionalization, but many argue it went too far. Today, the most severely mentally ill, often violent homeless individuals are rarely treated until they commit a serious crime that can't be ignored. And if you ask those same people, the justice system has become a revolving door as a whole. Cities are governed by their states, except Washington, D.C., which is its own district, but most still have their own local governments, usually with a mayor and a city council, and many of them have passed laws that are significantly more progressive than the larger state. A lot of these involve crime, with some cities like New York and Chicago choosing to not prosecute certain minor crimes to avoid funneling more people into prison. But what is a minor crime? That depends, and it can plunge a whole city into chaos. In many cities, crime like theft or even a misdemeanor assault aren't fully prosecuted. Instead, they're pushed into plea deals that let offenders walk free, as long as they stay out of trouble. This approach can help young offenders get a second chance, but it also lets career criminals walk out the door and head straight back into crime. Some cities have responded by voting out district attorneys seen as soft on crime, but the problem hasn't gone away. But is crime actually going up? This might be a time where it's actually good to listen to the old folks, because the crime rate today is nowhere near where it was in the late 1980s and 1990s, particularly in New York. The city saw over 2,200 murders in 1989, but in 2024 it only saw 377 murders. This is obviously a meteoric drop, and it's been attributed to everything from removing lead from the drinking water to less violence on kids' cartoons. But while the cities might be less dangerous than ever, it might not always feel that way, because unlike in 1989, we are seeing almost every crime in living color. If there are 3 words that describe a major US city today, it's often climate of fear. People say they're afraid to go outside, go to dinner, or take the subway, and that fear comes from knowing everything that's happening. It's not unusual for crime victims to jump on social media, sometimes still covered in blood, to share the terrifying story of their attack. Subway riders live stream as the raving man with a broken bottle begs for money and people wait anxiously for the next stop. It can make crime seem a lot more common than it actually is, and a lot of people have taken action and made the city a lot less livable in the process. If you went shopping in the big city these days, you're more likely to feel like you're window shopping even if you're inside the store. Shops have taken to casually locking up most of their goods to prevent shoplifting, which isn't anything new. If you've been to Walmart or Target, they commonly lock up their electronics items and other high-value items, but in many city CVS stores, even toothpaste and detergent are locked up. Shoppers have to hunt down an employee, slowing down your checkout, and the hassle has driven many people away from shopping in the city. And if that doesn't, the price will. People are being priced out of housing in the cities, but they also feel like they're being priced out of everything else. As a meme-worthy political candidate Jimmy McMillan once said, "The rent is too damn high," and that includes retail rent, which results in the prices being passed on to the customer. And since it's easy to hop on a bus or a train to the suburbs, plenty of people skip the city's sky-high prices, and that means it eventually closes down and gets replaced with an artisanal acai bowl store or a marijuana dispensary, and even getting a bite to eat can take a bite out of the pocketbook. One of the biggest reasons that people head to the big city is for dining out, but that's been becoming increasingly challenging in a lot of places. The problem is sky-high prices, with every sit-down restaurant feeling more like a splurge. Even fast casual places are breaking the $20 barrier for lunch. That's partly due to skyrocketing rents and partly the lingering fallout of COVID-19, with many restaurants still buried in debt. Add in out-of-control gratuities, restaurants packed with influencers snapping selfies, and the risk of crime or protesters if you dare eat outside. And then suddenly DoorDash feels safer. Just hope your driver doesn't steal your fries. But even one of the biggest advantages of living in the city isn't what it used to be. For decades, cities were job hubs and millions commuted in from the suburbs, crawling over bridges or cramming into unreliable buses and trains. Moving into the city was supposed to fix that, cutting out the wasted hours. Instead, city residents found themselves stuck in the same gridlock and on the same problematic transit. Because if there is one thing that's a consistent problem in American cities, it's that they are difficult to navigate. Cities are designed to be dense and packed with businesses and residential areas, which means there isn't as much room to build transit corridors. And that means you're more likely to see two-lane highways going each direction rather than a mighty four-lane highway. And in the tight urban grid of New York, even making a turn onto a main avenue can be a tricky affair. It's common for traffic to crawl through Manhattan during rush hour, and Los Angeles is especially infamous for its crushing traffic jams. But don't think you're avoiding it if you take public transportation. The big problem with taking the bus in a big city is that few have dedicated bus lanes, and that means that you're spending time in the same traffic as all the cars. Then there's the subway, which varies dramatically from city to city. While it's less likely to run into delays, the odds are if there's a malfunction in one of the cars, you could be down there for a lot longer than you planned. Additionally, the stations can be unpleasant, overheated places that attract criminals. And while subway shovings are very rare, a fear of a violent crime like that scares people away. And that means services might be getting worse and worse. Many cities have run into budget crises for their transportation systems, including New York and Philadelphia, where the latter is now facing heavy budget cuts. This is partially due to state budgeting policies and also partially due to turnstile jumpers not paying their fares. The result is that the city has to cut service even more, resulting in longer waits, overcrowding, and services stopping earlier and earlier. It all comes together in a situation that many people would like to avoid, which means it might be time to try out your own 2 feet. Surely one of the biggest advantages of living in the city is that you can traverse it on your own, right? No massive freeways or thick forests to worry about, that's for sure. But while walkable cities may be the goal, it doesn't always work out that way. New York is walkable if you're thinking about Manhattan, but other areas of Brooklyn, Queens, and the Bronx are far more spread out, and cities like Los Angeles or Atlanta are far more designed to be navigated by car. Cars are already expensive, and now New York's congestion pricing will make them costlier still, charging drivers to enter Midtown in the name of reducing traffic. But the biggest problem facing American cities might have very little to do with the cities themselves. Cities are dense, packed with people, heavily developed, and have replaced much of their green spaces with high-rises and urban blocks. That's a recipe for trapping heat, which is why hanging around the city in the summer can be sweltering. There are also many areas of the city that don't have much ventilation, like subway stations, which can crank up the temperature. And while most homes in the city are fully air-conditioned, the stress on the power grid during the summer can raise risks of blackouts. When they hit, they can wipe out power in an entire city if the infrastructure is damaged. And things might only get worse from here. People have been saying that cities in the United States are becoming uninhabitable, and that is mostly hyperbole, but it might not be for long, because many U.S. cities are at risk of becoming dangerous to live in, and the culprit is the climate. With rising risks, just a few shifts could push millions out of city limits. And it's not one threat but several, with some cities facing multiple apocalyptic scenarios at once, and some have already gotten a taste. One of the biggest risks of climate change is rising water levels. That's resulted in catastrophic flooding in some cities. Most famously, New Orleans saw devastating floods during Hurricane Katrina, which wiped out large portions of the city and resulted in over 1,000 deaths. Although this was at least partially due to flawed levees and a low-lying city plan that left the metropolis especially vulnerable. But coastal cities have also seen a crisis, such as the massive flooding that New York experienced during Hurricane Sandy. Even lesser storms have resulted in major floodings of subways, knocking out transit for days. Los Angeles, San Francisco, and many of the cities in coastal Florida are among the most vulnerable in the case of rising sea levels. Cities won't vanish overnight in a tidal wave, but as the ice caps erode, the sea could slowly swallow breaches and homes, forcing people to retreat further inland. But California is also vulnerable to earthquakes, with many people wondering when the next big one will hit. Earthquakes can also lead to tsunamis, which can speed up that process in a big hurry, often with no time to get away. But for other cities, it's not water that they need to worry about, it's fire. Phoenix, Santa Fe, Scottsdale, and Albuquerque are some of the fastest-growing cities in the country, and they are popular retirement spots. But there is one big problem. They're all in the Southwest, one of the hottest spots in the country during the summer. And while the locals will tell you, it's fine, it's a dry heat, that doesn't really matter when the temperature is approaching 120 degrees Fahrenheit, and it can do that a lot. Temperatures have been reaching record highs across the Southwest in the recent years. And it has people asking, how hot is too hot? If temperatures keep rising, the power grid will struggle to keep up. An outage at the height of the summer can be deadly. In recent years, sudden heat waves have hit places like the Pacific Northwest, where most homes don't even have air conditioning. And while cities are built to handle emergencies, they're facing more of them than ever, from extreme heat to wildfires that choke down towns with smoke. Some cities, particularly the biggest, have seen a decrease in population in recent years, but others, particularly those in the Southwest and South, have seen increases. And a big part of this is the infrastructure can't be replaced anywhere else. Much of the country is still sparsely populated, without any public transportation, and with only a fraction of the culture the big cities have. So for those who need to be in the middle of it all, they'll look at the crisis going on in the big city nearest them and then sign up anyway. But you best believe they'll be complaining all the way. And if America's cities are already struggling, imagine the fallout if the entire system collapsed. Find out what if the US economy crashes, or click on this video instead.